November 13th, 1942. 0:48 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal. A cone of searchlight cuts the humid night and lands square on the Japanese destroyer Amatsukaze. On her bridge, Captain Tamichihara squeezes the rail so hard his fingers ache, while American gun flashes stitch the darkness like a thunderstorm that forgot where the horizon is. Shells detonate around him so fast it stops feeling like individual shots and starts feeling like weather. Hot, metallic weather. Later, in a few rushed lines of his private log, he will admit what his eyes already know. The Americans are not counting shots. They're turning the sky into a furnace and daring anything living to move through it. In the next 35 seconds, USS San Francisco hurls more 5-inch shells than some Japanese destroyers carry for an entire cruise. Beyond the black skyline, on Oahu, ammunition ships are already taking on 15,000 tons of ordnance for the next convoy, enough to replace what tonight's battle will burn through dozens of times. In Tokyo, planners are arguing over whether they can budget 12 rounds per gun for the next escort run. The math is cruel, and it doesn't blink. Captain Hara will live to see the whole arc, from Pearl Harbor to surrender, an arc that breaks more than ships. It breaks assumptions. 6 months before this night off Guadalcanal, the ground began to shift, though hardly anyone sensed it at first. May 7th, 1942, Battle of the Coral Sea. On Shokaku, the executive officer Commander Teishi Naido keeps glancing at the American ships and frowns. Their cruisers and destroyers are throwing up continuous anti-aircraft fire, 4 straight hours without a breath. Japanese gunnery doctrine is the opposite of that. Wait until 800 meters, fire 3 to 5 round bursts, stop when probability drops, conserve what you've got. On Ryujo, Leiter Sidar Masatake Okumiya has drilled his crews to the second. They own 12 minutes of sustained AA fire. After that, nothing. Yet the Americans look like they've misplaced the word pause. The meaning of all this won't fully land until the campaign for Guadalcanal, where arithmetic climbs out of ledgers and onto the water. February 27th, 1942, Battle of the Java Sea. Tactically, Japan wins big. But Hara, on Amatsukaze, feels something unsettling in his bones. The Allied force, American, British, Dutch, Australian, under rear Oatsil. Carol Dorman fires 1,619 8-inch shells and manages 5 hits, 4 of them duds. Japanese salvos are fewer, but more telling. Still, when the shooting stops, Hara's wardroom conversation turns to numbers. The Allies never once let up. Their rates of fire would have emptied Japanese magazines in the first hour. They fire as if they have no bottom to the bin, he will write years later. Poor accuracy? Maybe. But a bottomless bin makes accuracy a nice-to-have, not a must. Back on Amatsukaze, the tally is ugly. She sailed with 2,000 5-inch rounds. One battle costs 800 of them, 40% of the locker. The sunken Allied cruiser, HMS Exeter, survivors claim, spit over 1,500 8-inch shells by herself. That's more than a lot of Japanese heavy cruisers carry total. The math keeps following Hara like a shadow he can't shake. August 7th, 1942, the Marines hit Guadalcanal. Vice ADM, Gunichi Mikawa barrels south from Rabaul with enough ammunition for one-night battle. Not because he's hedging or cautious, but because that's all the ammunition on hand. The August 9 night fight off Savo Island looks like vindication. In 33 minutes, 4 Allied heavy cruisers go down, 1,077 sailors die, and the Imperial Navy loses nothing. Yet behind the triumph sits a decision that gives away the bigger truth. Commander Toshikazu Omi, Mikawa's operations officer, will confess later. They withdrew not simply because dawn air attack loomed, but because their magazines were functionally empty. There was nothing left to shoot at undefended American transports sitting ripe and helpless a few miles away. While Tokyo praises the victory, Pearl Harbor loads USS Rainier with 5,000 tons of naval ammunition, 350,000 5-inch rounds, 1.2 million rounds of 40 mm, 3 million rounds of 20 mm. That's more than the entire combined fleet will fire in the next 3 months. The contrast is beyond tactical. It's supply chain versus scarcity. November 30th, 1942, the Tokyo Express, rear ADM. Raizo Tanaka runs 8 destroyers on another high-speed resupply. Captured manifests tell a blunt story. 1,000 drums of rice, 200 of medical supplies, 280 of ammunition for 15,000 starving men. Each drum of ammo roughly equals 300 rifle rounds or similar weight in other munitions. In other words, a full garrison living off what a single American destroyer can burn through in 20 minutes. A Matsukaze's captain writes in rage and resignation, "We risk a flotilla to deliver what the Americans waste on practice." On that very date, USS Fletcher tosses 127 5-inch practice shots over the side, about half a drum from Tanaka's precious cargo. The numbers stop being numbers. They turn into a feeling, hopeless. Then the factories show up. March 1943, Naval Ammunition Depot, Hastings, Nebraska. 48,000 acres of prairie sprout, 2,200 buildings, and 207 miles of track. 10,000 people clock in. This one site alone will turn out roughly 40% of the Navy's wartime ammunition. Opening month outpaces Japan's total naval output for the rest of 1943. 5-inch 38, the Navy's bread-and-butter gun, rolls off inspection lines at 100,000 rounds per month, rocketing to 300,000 by September. More rounds are rejected by quality control than Japan will manufacture in that period. At the same time, McAllister, Oklahoma, spins up heavy shells and bombs. By December 1943, it's stamping out 56-inch shells, 120 8-inch shells, 200 5-inch shells per day and runs that scale, plus 500,000 pounds of aerial ordnance, with 8,600 people on the payroll by 1945. In Japan, the Kure arsenal struggles to push 10,000 shells of all calibers monthly, while the expanded Toyokawa complex ekes out 35,000 machine guns and 4.5 million rounds with 56,400 workers, 6,000 of them schoolchildren. All of that steel, brass, and TNT becomes weather again, this time in the sky over the Philippine Sea. June 19th, 1944, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Vice Adm. Jizaburo Ozawa fields 9 carriers, 473 aircraft. Across the water, ADM. Raymond Spruance commands 15 carriers, 956 aircraft. And, more critical, magazines you can't frighten into silence. A Zero pilot from Taiho remembers his attack run, disintegrating into a black snowstorm of shrapnel. It isn't precise bursts, it's a wall. 5-inch mounts chug 15 rounds a minute. 40mm quads beat out 120 a minute. 20mm cannons hiss 450 a minute. USS Stockham alone barks 12,000 rounds of 40mm and 20,000 of 20mm in 6 hours. The scoreline is merciless. 476 Japanese aircraft gone, some with their carriers. 29 American aircraft lost. Ammunition expenditure, 200,000 5-inch, 500,000 40mm, 1.2 million 20mm. The math draws its own map. 4 months later, a knife fight off Samar turns volume into courage. October 25th, 1944, off Samar, 065 Gate. ADM, Takeo Kurita's center force, 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers, erupts out of rain squalls and finds Taffy, 3, 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, 4 DEs. On USS Johnston, Sea Dr. Ernest Evans orders flank speed and a charge. Over the next hour, Johnston throws down 200 plus 5-inch rounds into Kumano and rips her superstructure. She even snaps off 30 shots at Congo through smoke. On USS Samuel B. Roberts, Lieutenant Sea Doctor. Robert Copeland points a glorified convoy escort at a line of cruisers and says the quiet part aloud, survival is unlikely. Roberts has 3-5 rounds per gun, 1,625 total. One mount alone fires 600 plus shells in 35 minutes, turning the barrel near white. Gunner's mate Paul H. Carr, mortally wounded, is found still trying to ram one last 5-inch into a shattered breech. Across the line, Yamato finally fires her 18.1-inch main guns at surface targets, the biggest naval rifles ever built. But she's loaded for armor, and her shells whistle through thin-skinned carriers without detonating. That day's accounting is blunt. Americans spend roughly 20,000 rounds of all calibers. The Japanese about 3,000. U.S. losses: 2 destroyers, 1 DE, 1 escort carrier. Japanese heavy cruisers, 3 badly hammered. The larger fleet turns away from the smaller. Ammunition isn't just supply, it's will projected. By late 1944, U.S. output reaches heights that feel more like geology than industry. Between 1941 and 1945, America produces 47 billion rounds of small arms ammo, 41.4 billion rifle and pistol alone. One general jokes, it's 10 bullets per person on Earth. A single month, November 1944, looks like this: 3.5 billion small arms rounds, 1.2 million 5-inch, 8 million 40 millimeter, 20 million 20 millimeter, 10,000 16-inch, 15,000 14-inch, 40,000 8-inch, 60,000 6-inch. Meanwhile, Japan's total output across the whole war hovers around 15 million rounds of all types. Crane, Indiana, sprawls 63,000 acres, with 2,000 storage magazines holding 400,000 tons, twice what the entire Imperial Navy had in reserve in December 1941. There are human lives inside those numbers. In Hastings, the Shell City runs dorms, cafeterias that serve 15,000 meals daily, bowling alleys, movie nights, schools for workers' kids. In Toyokawa, a 12-year-old named Akiko Sato writes of hunger, of 1 rice ball for lunch, of 12-hour shifts, and classmates crushed or burned. Her section might make 100 shells in a day. An American destroyer's 40mm mount can spit that in 16 minutes of combat. Shortages poison training most of all. Saburo Sakai remembers 700 hours of flight time for pre-war pilots. By 1944, replacements get 40-60. Gunnery practice shrivels to 100 rounds total, or less, before combat. In Pensacola, trainees burn through 5,000 rounds in advanced fighter school alone and keep shooting until they hit. U.S. flyers hold 405-25 flight hours throughout the war. One late-war Japanese ensign fires his guns 3 times before combat, 10 rounds per trigger pull. The first American he meets likely spends 30 rounds in the first second. On the ocean, an entirely new organism, the Mobile Logistics Fleet, changes what a Navy can be. Service Squadron 10 is a drifting city. 34 oilers, 11 escort carriers for replacement planes, 19 ammunition ships, 16 reefers, 8 hospital ships, 12 fleet tugs, 29 DEs riding herd. July 21, 1945, Task Group 30.8.8 performs one of history's biggest at-sea replenishments. 6,869 tons of ammunition, 3,157 barrels of fuel oil, 1,635 tons of provisions, 99 new aircraft, 421 personnel, all delivered in motion. That single ammo transfer likely exceeds the total stocks at many Japanese bases. Inside Japan, the cost of keeping guns fed becomes cultural trauma. Copper, the lifeblood of shell casings, runs so short that neighborhood committees haul away household pots and door handles. 45,000 Buddhist temple bells, 90% of the nation's bells, are melted between 1937 and 1945. A 500-kilogram bell yields brass for about 2,000 small-caliber casings. A single American 40mm mount can chew that in a quarter of an hour. A 13-year-old writes that they took her school bell. The teacher cried. How many shells will it make? She wonders. The answer back on the firing line is measured in minutes. Then comes the most lopsided demonstration of magazine depth in the entire war. April 6-7, 1945. Operation Tengo. Yamato sails on a one-way sortie with 170 shells for her 9 18.1-inch rifles, 130 per gun, a load that represents Japan's entire remaining stock of that ammunition. Add 1,629 rounds for her 6.1-inch guns and 13,500 rounds of AA. And the truth remains, there will be no reload. Her captain tells the crew as much. The first wave of 386 American aircraft reports ferocious AA. The third says it's thinning. By the fifth, it's a flicker. Survivor Mitsuru Yoshida remembers the small guns going silent first, then the 5-inch equivalents, then nothing from the big rifles. A 70,000-ton warship becomes a floating target. Meanwhile, USS Essex, replenished 72 hours earlier with 500 tons of ammunition, launches again, Her air group alone will spend 200,000 rounds of 50 caliber attacking Yamato, confident that tomorrow another ammo ship will top them off. The ammunition gap doesn't just change outcomes, it changes how people fight. ADM. Willis Ching. Lee formalizes area saturation for night actions. It's don't thread needles, fill zones. Surigao Strait, October 25th, 1944. In 18 minutes, ADM. Jesse Oldendorf's line shoves out 285 16-inch, 310 14-inch, and thousands of 8 and 6-inch shells. Fuso and Yamashiro, sailing light to save weight, manage under 100 large-caliber shots back before they disappear into blast and spray. A survivor from Yamashiro says the shells fell like a monsoon. For every one they fired, 50 came in. On the other end of scarcity lies desperation. The special attack units, kamikaze, are the logical end state of empty magazines. If you can't afford the steel, you spend the pilot. Vice Adam. Takijiro. Onishi knows what that implies. One man and one plane substitute for hundreds of shells he cannot procure. American codebreakers discover they can read Japan's operational pulse through its ammunition requests. A decrypted message in December 1944 lists inventory percentages. 16-inch at 15%, 14-inch at 22%, 8-inch at 18%, 5-inch at 31%. AA critical shortage. ADAM. Chester Nimitz glances up and says, "They're a boxer who's lost his punch. Submarines then step in to make sure the punch never returns." 147 ammunition ships sunk, roughly 500,000 tons of ordnance to the bottom, over half of all ammo shipments lost. USS Wahoo blows Fukuei Maru sky high in January 1943. The blast is visible 40 miles off. That one ship carried more than Rabaul would see for 3 months. A convoy commander delivers 2,000 tons out of 10,000 loaded. The rest are sunk or burning. A logistics officer in the Philippines kills himself when another run fails. "Our guns fall silent while theirs do not," he writes. It's not melodrama, it's bookkeeping with blood. Technology widens the gulf. The proximity fuse, born at Johns Hopkins APL, eats $1 billion 1940s money, roughly 5% of Japan's 1944 GNP all by itself, and demands manufacturing tolerances Japan can't meet. By war's end, the U.S. has built 22 million of them, turning near misses into kills and boosting AA lethality by 300–600%. Japanese fuses, starved of quality materials, fail 30% of the time by 1945. Fire control follows the same script. The American Mark 37 system, stabilized, radar-coupled, servo-driven, costs $500,000 a copy and makes day-night. Bad weather fire accurate and repeatable. Japanese ships still rely on optics and the human eye. Survivability becomes statistical. USS Laffey, on April 16, 1945, weathers 4 bombs and 6 kamikaze hits yet lives, because in 80 minutes she keeps 8 barrels barking, 3 to 45 5-inch, the 11,040 millimeter, 20 found 20 millimeter shots. 9 attacking aircraft go down for certain, 4 more crash later. Contrast Yahagi escorting Yamato, AA ammo gone in 45 minutes, nothing left, but maneuvering until 7 torpedoes and 12 bombs end her story. Even ship nicknames tell the tale. USS Helena, the machine gun cruiser, spends 10,639 rounds across her career, 3,465-inch, a 7,179 6-inch, firing so fast in the November 13, 1942 night battle, the Japanese lookouts think America invented automatic 6-inch guns. They didn't. They invented the logistics to fake it. Underneath all the tactics and tech lurks the economy. In 1944, America's GNP hits $210 billion source. Japan's sights near $20 billion. The raw inputs track accordingly. U.S. industry gulps 450,000 tons of copper a year, 380,000 of lead, 2.88 million of steel for munitions, 3.2 million of explosives. Japan's entire national consumption, civilian and military, for those categories never reaches 80,000 tons copper, 25,000 lead, bisechki 4 million steel, mostly for ships, 200,000 explosives, The United States pours more copper into casings than Japan has for everything: wires, motors, radios, bullets combined. So, when August 15th, 1945 arrives and Emperor Hirohito tells his nation a new and terrible bomb compels surrender, military professionals on both sides already understand. The bomb speeds a conclusion written by factories. A final report from Curie on August 14th lists 73 shells produced that day with 423 workers, 200 of them middle school students. Materials: critical shortage. That same day, Hastings reports 45,000 shells produced with 5,800 workers and recommends cutting output in anticipation of victory. If you want the whole war in one ratio, it's this: 47 billion to 15 million. That's small arms rounds alone, 3,000 to 1. And it still understates the gap, because quality rides shotgun with quantity. The proximity fuse, radar directors, the discipline to feed and train crews without rationing practice, the edge multiplies itself. The psychology follows the logistics. On U.S. decks, confidence becomes policy. The ammo ships will be here in 2 days, sailors say, and push in. Destroyers knife at battleships. DES lunge at cruisers. PT boats bite destroyers. David versus Goliath only works when David brings infinite stones. On Japanese decks, thrift becomes a reflex you can't shake in a gun duel. Litor Kazuhiko, Ono, gunnery officer on Isokaze, will later describe an internal calculator that never switches off. Can we afford this shot? In a fight where the other side never asks that question, your equation ends with your ship on the bottom. 2 young men finish the story better than any admiral. A 25mm gun captain on Zuikaku receives 10 rounds for his mount in its last battle and waits for the perfect range that never quite arrives. He goes down with unfired cartridges at his feet because scarcity paralyzes. On USS Essex, a 20mm gunner writes home that they shoot so much it looks like an endless fireworks display and tells his mother not to worry, there's always more. Courage is equal on both sides, the triggers aren't. 80 years on, the lesson still stings because it's bigger than one ocean or one era. Battles are performed by sailors and pilots, but they're choreographed by factories and freight cars long before the first salvo. In the Pacific, American shells fell like rain because American plants churned like storms. Japanese shells were precious because Japanese plants worked like craftsmen in a world that demanded blast furnaces. November 13th, 1942, off Guadalcanal, Captain Tamichihara stared at a sky turned to daylight by 5-inch tracers and finally grasped the script the Pacific War would keep reading aloud. The United States could fire without thinking because it had built a system that made thinking unnecessary. Japan could only think without firing because every round was a slice of national treasure. Between those two realities opened an abyss. Into that abyss fell not just ships and planes, but a set of beliefs about how modern war could be fought on thrift. The brass casings scattered across seabeds from Samar to Savo still carry their stamps. Lot numbers, depot codes, dates. Each one is a receipt made out to industry, paid in full. And each one whispers the same verdict that our channel, What If History, keeps circling back to. In a contest between a nation that must count and a nation that doesn't have to, the ending is written before anyone touches the trigger.